we discussed why is the Parsha Stuma. The paragraph structure of the portion is written in a way where it's referred to as a sealed portion. In what sense is it sealed? So the first interpretation was that when Yaakov passed away, the eyes and the hearts of the Jews became desensitized, became shut down, and therefore the effect of the bondage, the impurities of Egypt, started to erode the spiritual quality of the Jewish people, because the physical bondage hadn't yet started. The second interpretation was that Yaakov wanted to reveal the Kates, the end of time when Mashiach is coming, and then it was concealed from him, and he wasn't able to share this with his children, because God didn't want him to share this. So we asked the question, and if he would have shared it with them. Yaakov and his family at this moment was going back 4,000 years ago. To date, Mashiach still hasn't come. If he would have revealed to him then that Mashiach is coming in the year 2021 in Teves, tomorrow, what difference would have made? That's firstly. Secondly, if you do know when he's coming, when you don't know when he's coming, what difference does it make? If you knew he was coming next week, would it make a difference? So then you would say it would make a difference. Because knowing when he comes, ultimately, man will no longer have free choice any longer. Because the whole value of life is challenge. And you're challenged because we have an evil inclination. So if all evil will come to an end when Mashiach comes, so the value of our actions cease to be. Because the value is only because it's only due to our own initiative that we do good and we succumb to the influences and the machinations of the evil inclination. So knowing where it comes, when he comes, that you'll say will somehow affect our free choice. And God wants it to be open-ended, and therefore we should be in a position not knowing that whatever we do, it's due to our initiative, understanding of the value of doing right and not doing wrong. But if we're going back 4,000 years ago, and Yaakov knew when it was, and he still hasn't come, God did not want him to share it with his children. And that's why it's a sealed portion. It was concealed from him that he should not share it with his children. That's the question. Rabbeinu Bachya, in his introduction, cites a midrash, which the commentator in the Rabbeinu Bachya writes, he looked for this midrash, he wasn't able to locate it. But it's a midrash which Rabbeinu Bachya cites. Initially, Yaakov wanted to share when Mashiach will come, except he hesitated. Why did he hesitate? Because he felt that maybe his children are slightly tainted with sin. And because they're tainted with sin, they're not worthy of this information. But then he realized that the letters ches and tes, which spell chet, which is sin, are not found among the letters of the names of his children. So that indicates that they are sin-free, they are not tainted with sin, therefore they're qualified to receive this information. And he was about to share it with them. Then he realized the two other letters which are not found among the names of his children. Kuf Tzadi, Ketz. Ketz means the end. So he realized of all the names of his children, the letters Kuf Tzadi are not mentioned. Therefore, that's an indication that he's not supposed to share this with his children. And therefore, he chose not to share it. Initially, because they weren't qualified, because maybe they were tainted with sin, therefore they're not qualified to receive this information. Then he realized they're not tainted with sin, he was about to. And then when he realized the letters Kuf Tzadi, which refer to the end of time, are not among the letters of his children, that means it's not meant to be that this information be shared with them. What's going on over here? What is it all about? There's a Rabbeinu Bachya in Parshas Zos HaBrocha, last parsha in the Torah, portion of the Torah, that he writes that The first pasuk the Gemara tells us you teach a child when he begins speaking is the verse Torah tzivulonu Moshe Morosho Kilas Yaakov. Morosho. It is the heritage of Yaakov. Grammatically speaking, the context of Morosho means that a Jew, not only does he have an obligation to study Torah and maintain his heritage for himself, we have to do whatever we can to guarantee to preserve it, that it can be passed on to the future generation, and into the future, that it should never be in jeopardy. That whatever we can do in our lifetimes to assure the transmission of the accuracy of the authentic Torah that was given at Sinai, that is the obligation of every generation. It's Moroshe Kilas Yaakov. It's something which has to remain intact as was given to Moshe to be given over to the next generation. That is included within the word Moroshe Kilas Yaakov. So there's no question. The more qualified a person is, as we say, Zeu Chocham Arosa Nolad, a person who's a Chocham is able to see into the future, he understands from the present, he's able to see the ramifications based on today, what's going to be tomorrow, what's going to be into the near future, and he addresses whatever those issues are to make sure that the future should be intact and be in a preserved state. Okay? Now, how far in the future do we go? With whatever is within our capacity. That is the responsibility of every nation, every generation, to preserve the Torah for the future, the next generation, or maybe a person has such foresight for 2 generations into the future. What about a person has certain conflicts of interest, and he has a jaundiced eye, and what he sees, he's not seeing it as he should see it because of his own conflicts of interest. So when he sees into the future and the way he wants to innovate it and apply it and do whatever he can to contribute to that, it's slightly off because of you not being qualified because you're tainted with sin. So that lack of clarity due to your own conflict, because you're tainted with sin, you don't see appropriately, therefore you can't innovate now for the future because it's slightly off, or maybe even more than slightly off. Therefore, Yaakov felt if his children are tainted with sin, he's not going to share it with them, because the value of sharing, when the end of time is, knowing when that is, they'll do today whatever is necessary to that point in time. So when he realized that they were not tainted with sin, because the letters Ches Tes were not among the names of his children, he was going to share it with them, because they had the capacity to see generations into the future, to do whatever they are able to do to guarantee that certain things should evolve as they should evolve. But then Yaakov realized the letters Kuf Tzadi were not there. Ketz, which means the end of time, meaning the way God wants things should unfold and evolve, it's not being privy to when it's happening. It's based on your own understanding to whatever degree. Based on that, that's how you prepare for the future. Not to have the inside scoop, so to say, on when it's going to happen. That's Tashkocha. That's the way God wants divine providence should be applied and things should unfold. So the value of knowing when Mashiach is coming, even though he hasn't come for 4,000 years, they had the capacity and the ability to make innovations in their time that ultimately, the way things would evolve, they would evolve to affect even 4,000 years later. That was the capacity of the Avos and their children. That was the capacity of the children. But since the letters Kuf Tzadi, or even if you go without the Midrash, which Rabbeinu Bachya cites, God withheld it from him, it's not something they should know. It's something they should do based on their own capacity, their own understanding, without being privy to this piece of information.